Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, our guest today is calling all the way from Front Royal, Virginia, which is at the start of the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia. And actually, there's a great Boston connection with a lot of, I believe, either Civil War Bostonians that were down in Front Royal many years ago. Well, we have with us the president of Human Life International, Father Shenan Boquet. Welcome, Father Boquet.
Thank you, Brendan. It's good to be with you and your audience today.
Father Boquet, I wanted to ask, first of all, what is the mission of Human Life International? What do they do, and where do they go, and what are they trying to accomplish?
Well, sure. For our audience that may not have be overly familiar with Human Life International, we were founded by a Benedictine priest, Father Marx, originally in 1972 and under the Human Life Center. And Father Marx, recognized there was with the descent from Humani Vitae that was being very prevalent within the climate of the day, that if we didn't address the issues of dissent and proper teaching of church teaching, that it would have a ripple effect, not only in the United States, which we would eventually see with Roe v. Wade, but that we would see this travel globally. And so in 1981, continuing on the work that he began, he founded Human Life International. And so the majority of our work as a Catholic educational apostolate is to really reach out to different leaders around the world, working with our bishops and priests and seminarians and lay leaders on formation on issues of life and family, and confronting the elements of the culture of death. So dealing with the issue of contraception, which is the root of the issue, and talking about abortion, euthanasia, the issues of affecting natural marriage, and also just the reproductive technology issues that we see so prevalent today in the culture. So it's been a great joy to be able to work with great leaders around the world and to deal with these and how to support their work. Mm-hmm. So today, it's been about 60 countries that I've had a chance to visit, and approaching those wonderful 1 million miles of travel, and just really never realized as a young boy from South Louisiana that the Lord would make me a pro-life missionary these days. So it's been 23 years come June of ordination. So it's been a great joy working with Human Life International.
Uh-huh. Now, I wanted to ask you, recently you had written an article or a commentary in May of 2016 entitled Religious Freedom This Memorial Day regarding the ongoing catastrophic birth rates in Europe. What are the reasons for the low birth rates in Europe?
Yeah, I think for our audience, it's good for them to be familiar with the different cultural and historical aspects that have affected Europe. I mean, obviously, when we're looking at Eastern Europe, so in the article I spoke about Belarus and my recent trip to Slovakia and Poland, and you look at the areas of those countries that were affected during World War II and prior to World War II and even afterward. We saw that, because of the great violence of abortion that was imposed on so many of these countries, that the climate there really is that the result of very low birth rate and low fertility rates, which, as of today are causing both economic and demographic problems within those communities. And as a consequence, if these countries don't change the mentality towards life and the openness to life, that their own way of life, their own culture, may fall out of existence. And so, whereas versus in Central Europe and Western Europe, we see a very different picture, a climate that really is very materialistic, has become very secular. As remember in the 80s, when the European Union was being gradually founded, that one of the things that the great St. John Paul II and eventually Pope Benedict XVI and even Pope Francis today, talks about is how Europe, as a way, has rejected its root, its Christian root, its identity, its own purpose and definition, if you will. And so you see it becoming very secular. And as a consequence, part of the secular mentality is very utilitarian. And so children are seen as problematic, as too costly, and just the family life as we would know it, of fidelity within marriage, the openness to life within marriage, are considered, passé. We need to be more up with the current moment of time, and we see this really playing out, sadly, within Ireland recently, when we see Ireland, embracing and allowing the legalization of homosexuality and same-sex unions, to some of the allowing the conversation for abortion to be in moments of in extreme situations or exception. We see the same thing playing out, and even all the way across, the world, in the Philippines, another Catholic country. So there's much to learn from Europe, and our audience, really, I would encourage them, to become very familiar, with the climate in Europe, and to be familiar with the negative, but also the positive. You look at Poland in 1993; it changed its constitution, to recognize the dignity of life, and right now there's an opportunity to confront what's remaining of that situation, because about 1,000 abortions occur a year in Poland, and these are usually due to diagnosis of Down syndrome or to what they would consider, these exceptional cases. And so now there's an opportunity to remove that decision and really make Poland 100% for life. So that would be a wonderful blessing. So there's great change.
In 1993, is that when the communist fell? The communist regime fell in Poland, and then
that sadly I don't remember if that's the actual time or year, but obviously the influence upon Poland, from political, obviously gave them opportunity to make these changes.
I see. Poland is a Catholic country.
It is
primarily. What about those other countries, Romania or Slovakia? Are they seeing, or Eastern European countries? Some of those were under communist domination, which was pro-abortion, my understanding.
Right. Well, Slovakia, for example, I just had a chance to visit this early spring, as I did with Belarus, and Slovakia, give our audience an opportunity to see what's happening there in a positive light. Is that though they suffered the issue of communism, what we're seeing today is a radical change within the climate of last year. They had their beautiful March for Life, and they had over 80,000 Slovakians participate. Now, just for our audience to kind of put that in perspective in the sense of population, that would be equivalent to about 5.5 million Americans showing up in Washington, D.C. to participate in the March for Life. So our audience should be, really amazed by 80,000 plus people in Slovakia, which it shows that there is a great climate change, cultural change, and an openness. And many of the leaders I met in this recent trip have been working for years, and they're starting to see the great fruit of the work. I was amazed to see families with young children. I was amazed to see climate within even the political system very much supporting family life and supporting the beauty of family life and promoting laws that would protect the family and protect children. So it's a great sign of hope, and I really believe that that many of the Eastern countries are opportunity for the rest of the world, because they who had all these issues imposed upon them by totalitarian tactics of different political ideological systems, they're coming out from underneath that, and they're realizing that they must change in order to survive. Belarus, remarkable. I would say probably out of most of my trips that all have left indelible marks. Belarus has left an indelible mark because I have never seen such a pro-life climate in the sense of billboards. Even in the city of Grando, they have a metropolitan bus that's painted in pro-life green with pro-life messaging all over the bus. Inside the bus is filled with pro-life propaganda, family, and children. Now, imagine that in Boston. Imagine that in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles or even in New Orleans, a very Catholic climate. Never. I have never seen that anywhere in all my travels, but there in Belarus. And even I remember one sign, I was traveling from the city of Pinsk back to Minsk, and there was a huge sign with 3 nurses, and the nurses were each holding a baby, and the sign said, "We love your children. Please protect your children." And so it's remarkable, a real shift in thought and in praxis.
Well, of course, Belarus was part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union, Russia has had very high abortion rates per woman, like 4 or 5 abortions per woman.
Correct.
And when I heard that, I almost fell off my chair several years ago. Let me ask you, I was shocked to hear that in England, the babies that were born were named the most popular name in either London, England, or the country of England was Mohammed. Have the Western European and Central European countries, are they coming around to the realization that they have to procreate to continue their cultures?
Well, unfortunately, it would depend on which country we might be talking about, but overall, very sadly, the fertility rate numbers in Western and Central Europe are very low. So basically, for our audience, which is already a very low number in the fertility rate, global number is about 2.1, 2.2, which means basically no one has 2.5 children. So we would say the average, obviously, is around 3 children. But in most of Europe, especially Central and Western Europe, we're looking at a number of something like 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, some even lower, closer to 1, depending on which country. And so you see that right currently, as it is, there is a very dangerous moment demographically in Europe, and we see such a rejection of faith, of the absolute about life. Sadly, within England, we see numbers when it comes to diagnosis of children, still in womb with like say Downs, for example, that we see numbers as high as 90% of them are aborted. So we have some very sadness.
I see. As far as the issue of contraception, and it dawned upon me actually doing this show about 10 years ago that contraception really changed everything, how men relate to women, and more entering into a selfishness when it comes to pleasure regarding sexual activity. Is there a way, do you see a way out of where countries, is it possible to get a country to reject contraception once the country has been inundated with, let's say, condoms, for instance?
The answer would be yes, and it can happen. And I've seen in different climates, different countries, where the conversation about this issue has become more receptive. And so that through the training programs we do and through the educational programs that we do, when people begin to realize what contraception is, what the contraceptive mentality does, and I think it's important for our audience, again, to know that even the use of that phrase, contraceptive mentality, really flowed from the tongue of Father Marx, our founder, and, of course, John Paul II, and how the mentality of contraception basically says, I'm in control. I can choose whether I want to be open to life or not open to life. I can use and manipulate what has naturally been given, and now it's under my control. And so we see the consequences of this, and I think for our audience to read the prophetic statements of now Blessed Paul VI in Humanae Vitae is very important. And one of those consequences was going to be the breakdown within marriage, that men would begin to objectify women. And we see this in the huge pornography industry, making billions of dollars today, on the perversion of sexuality. We see the high divorce rates in Western cultures around the world, and in countries where contraception becomes legalized and more readily available, we see, again, the rise in issues of adultery and the breakdown within marriage. And of course, the product of this is that children suffer greatly at the hands of this mentality. And Father Marx used to say, contracepting parents, produce fornicating children. And I think for our audience, really think about what that says. So when parents are selfish and closed-minded with regard to the openness to life and begin to use the beautiful gift of human sexuality that God has given to man and to woman in the beauty of marriage and the openness to life, that if they themselves are selfish and self-centered, their children will have a consequence that will flow to them, and see sexuality and the use of sexuality and the beauty of sexuality as something that can be used for their own pleasure, their own gratification, and the usage of other people. So that contraception issue, really, Brendan, is what I often say in my presentations. It's the big 10-ton pink, blue, polka-dotted elephant covered in manure that everybody tries to ignore.
Wow.
It's this huge presence that everyone tries to circumvent. And for our audience, abortion is the stepchild of contraception. It flows directly from the heart of contraception.
Mm-hmm. I believe that one guest I had on followed all the men in Europe and in America, including the Rockefellers, that first wanted to bring contraception into the country with the eventual idea of bringing abortion into the country. And it was many men, not just Margaret Sanger, who... And I guess, why is secularism successful in Western Europe and, I guess, most recently, Ireland? And could you talk to when Christianity, first centuries, was the bellwether of Europe, and how did it make the family flourish, and what has been the diminution of that? What are the causes of that, would you say?
Oh, sure. We all know, especially those who come from very strong Catholic family environments and very strong, godly centered family environments. What puts us in right direction is when we understand our relationship with our Creator, with our Heavenly Father. And through the life of the church and through our closeness to the sacraments, it keeps us, very, very much focused on that narrow path, which changes the way that I express myself, the way the decisions I make. And so when we look at, for example, Europe, and we look at these very strong Catholic countries, that really were built upon those roots of that we're speaking of, those fundamental principles of Christianity, it helped not only give them identity, it also helped them to how would they deal with the global community, how they deal with their neighbors, how they would deal with the political environment. And this all flowed, and again, the church in her beautiful teaching, when speaking about the family, we know that the family is that unit upon which society is built. And so if children learn those moral values and those absolutes and those objective truths, then that moves into society. And so where did I learn to respect others? I learned it from my parents. Where did I learn do not steal? Learn that from my parents. These values come from within the home. And so when we see the breakdown of the family, when we see the rejection of God, when we see the rejection of those absolute truths, and we allow secularism and moral relativism, which basically means, Brendan, you could believe what you want to believe, I can believe what I want to believe, and as long as I don't discriminate against you and offend you, well, you can do what you want to do, and I can do what I want to do. And isn't this the real issue today, flowing around the issue of homosexuality, or the issue today of even polygamy that's being promoted now in some of the Western cultures? So long as it doesn't, I can do what I want to do. I can express myself the way I want to express myself. Well, this has no end to it. It's that slippery slope. And so this is with that secular mentality that looks upon the human person purely from a utilitarian perspective. And so, I'm a worker, I'm a laborer, I can contribute to the culture, contribute to society, and then we see when that I'm no longer able to do that, and I'm no longer treated and objectified in an objective way, then, well, guess what? Well, euthanasia can come in. I'm old, I'm diseased. Well, you've lived your life. It's time for you to go away and someone else to take your place. So there's no end to this mentality. Mm-hmm. So we need to return as John Paul II said in Evangelium Vitae in paragraph 95, he talks about that we have to reform consciences. We have to reteach those objective truths. And even John Paul II, back in 1982, I put that in the article that you referenced earlier, my last article of the last week of May, quoting John Paul and his challenge to Europe to reclaim its root, to rediscover itself. And I really believe that the only way that Europe is going to change and that these issues that we're talking about are going to be rejected is only by a resurgence of their own Christian identity.
Well, what is the Human Life International strategy to do that, to counter, for instance, the Central and Western European secularization, which has spilled definitely over into America in the last 50 years or so? Do you have any success stories, country by country, thus far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say that one of the key strategies that HLI employs, through its educational apostolate, is one particular target group would be our seminarians, our possible future priest. And why is that important? Whether we're looking at seminarians, priest, or working with lay faithful, is if I can help a young man understand these issues and broaden his scope in bioethics and life and family issues, well, that one person, if he is ordained a Catholic priest, will impact people for 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 years. So that is a key strategy, is helping people who will have the greatest impact upon society. So that young priest possibly could be not only a pastor, a teacher, he could be a formator of other young men. He might even be a bishop, might even be a cardinal. Who knows, could be a pope one day. The influence of that one individual, but I could apply the same thing as HLI does in working with future doctors, our doctors, nurses, teachers, lawyers, legislators. We work with, a gambit of different groups of people in order to really broaden their understanding of these issues so that we can also help them to build programs that they can employ in their own communities. And so one success story, for example, is in Kenya. Father Wanjohi, who's been with HLI now well over a decade, and he himself was a seminary rector. He now has been working on building guilds around Kenya, helping future lawyers, future teachers, future doctors, and other professionals in how to argue the cases that are coming from the secular culture. So I'll give you an example. I met a young man who received his degree in law, and now he works now in the Supreme Court system, as a lawyer, in front of the Supreme Court. And he was formed by Father Wanjohi in the natural law and in the teaching of the church, and man is extremely articulate and convicted, impassioned, and it's such a joy to see. So that's impacting the culture. So it's a strategy. It's one strategy that HLI employs.
Oh, very, very good. Well, Father Boquet, our time has come to an end, and we really appreciate your sharing these thoughts and this overview, particularly of what's been going on in the European theater and how it spills into America also. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Brendan, very much, and thank you for having me, and I thank your audience for listening to me today. Please continue to pray for me and pray for the work of Human Life International.
Very well. Well, we hope you found today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Thanks for watching. My name is Brendan O'Connell. We'll see you next week.